Okay, good morning. Thank you for being interested in what we're going to share this morning. This project, this presentation is going to be basically in two pieces, parts. I'm going to kind of lead you through as to how the city of Frankfort got to the point of receiving almost an $8 million FHWA Tiger grant to do this project, and give you a little overview of the project itself. And then Chase is going to go through some of the detailed design construction activities that took place, right away utilities. This project, this was a unique opportunity for me as a retired transportation employee to take a project from the beginning to the end. And of course, I never did that in transportation cabinet because you're always working in a specific function or division. So as this project was set up, it involved FHWA, KYTC staff, of course, Strand Associates, City of Frankfort. We dealt with seven different utilities. We dealt with property owners that were adjacent to the project. This was an urban street project, and so you had businesses that were affected by construction work. And so my role in this project was to basically work with all local interests and property owners to kind of work through the issues that came up from time to time, and also to make sure that we treated them in a fair and equitable way. This is just a real quick shot of the project limits. Those of you who aren't familiar with downtown Frankfort, the Kentucky River, of course, bisects Frankfort. To the north is the downtown historic district, and then it extends across the river into the south, and the gray area is the South Frankfort Historic District. So that gives you some idea of what we dealt with through the environmental process and dealing with the historic districts and properties. This project, US60, prior to I-64 and interstate system, US60 was the primary route between Louisville and Lexington. So you can imagine the traffic that used to be on US60. US60 goes into West Frankfort and down Louisville Hill. So this project starts right at the foot of the hill, Taylor Avenue, across the 2nd Street School property, which is an elementary middle school for Frankfort Independent School. Also, City Hall is located on 2nd Street. That was nice about this project. If I want to go out on the project, go off out the front door. You know, how many times do you get to do that? So that was a nice thing for me. And then across is the Capitol Avenue Bridge, the Kentucky River, and then it goes up East Main Street toward Kentucky State University. The yellow section involved all the phases of the project. The purple section is basically a utility replacement project involving Frankfort Sewer, Frankfort Plant Board, water, and also Columbia Gas. So that purple section has all brand new utility infrastructure from those three utilities. I think the project is about 7/10 of a mile, just to be technically correct. One of the things that the city, I didn't start with the city working with them part-time until December of 2018 when this Tiger Grant project got started. But back in 2012 and 2013, the genesis of the 2nd Street project was an EPA project that the city participated in, which was called Greening of America's Capitals. It was a program EPA set up to try to identify how they could make more aesthetically pleasing and environmentally pleasing state capitals. And so Kentucky was picked as one of the states that was involved in that project. And so there was a lot of public involvement from interest groups and individuals to kind of define how they wanted this downtown area to look, which is basically between the Capitol and downtown Frankfort, this corridor. So they kind of came up with some ideas on what they wanted to do. And so as this project developed, that was kind of the background for that. And also one of the things we wanted to do was look at existing conditions and try to address some of the issues that were involved in this corridor. The top left is, as you enter the corridor, Second Street School on your left, you have narrow sidewalks, you have a center, traffic lane that's basically was unused. Top right corner is a 70-foot crosswalk, which was along, for pedestrians to cross, Bridge Street toward the school. Lower left, of course, is again that shows that center left turn lane that is rarely used. The narrow sidewalks, on the lower part of that image is, right in front of a business. There was no defined sidewalk, which was an issue with the school. And then of course, the bottom right, there's about 3 different locations in this. There's one here, and one here, where there were steps or multi-tiered sidewalks that were inaccessible to ADA people who wanted to get around downtown Frankfort. So the project again was wanting to incorporate that also. This is the Green Americas Communities Plan I just briefly talked about. Again, the genesis for this in the lower right corner, you can see the Second Street corridor, which is kind of highlighted in the purple. Again, you can see some of the ideas that came up as far as trees and landscaping and sidewalks, those type of issues. So all of this Green Americas plan, all of the existing conditions were taken into account when the type of grant application was written. And the city of Frankfort applied for a type of grant 4 consecutive years and finally was successful in the 4th year. I think that's the way to go with a lot of grant programs, is you try over and over again until you finally hit that sweet spot, or you have a lot of political influence, which Kentucky does. You have a Senate Majority Leader. His wife was Secretary of Transportation, USDOT. We had Congressman Andy Barr of Lexington, Senator Rand Paul. So we had political stars aligned, I think, on this 4th effort to get this grant approved. Also, as fostering partnership opportunities, we took the opportunity also, the Frankfort Plant Board, which is a municipally owned utility, provides electric, telecommunications, water, phone service. They were dealing with a lot of old infrastructure, and they took the opportunity on this corridor to put all new water infrastructure. We separated combined sewers into sanitary and storm. We undergrounded utility, overhead utilities. So the plant board was also wanting to do a lot of work, and this project provided that opportunity. Commit to local match. We received nearly $8 million federal money, and the grant application included commitments of about $750,000 from KYTC, $2.8 million from the city of Frankfort, and then another $825,000 from Columbia Gas and Frankfort Plant Board Utilities. So we had over $4 million in local match to go along with an $8 million request. That was probably another reason why we were granted approval for this grant, because of the local commitment, especially to the funding side of it. The 4th iteration of applying for this grant took a tremendous effort, as I mentioned, between political leadership, both local, state, and federal. There were trips made to Washington, D.C. to lobby our congressional delegation. A lot of local leaders, both city and county, were involved in this. And so it was in March of 2018 that the city of Frankfort was awarded it nearly an $8 million Tiger grant. As I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of people involved in this project, and the project role, of course, for Federal Highway Administration that provided the Tiger funding and ultimate oversight for the project. Transportation Cabinet was in a review process, or was in a review role, looking at preliminary design plans, environmental. So they've had a lot of review phases in this project. And of course, as I said, the $750,000 of funding. City of Frankfort, there were a lot of course, local city of departments, Public Works, Frankfort Sewer Department, Planning and Community Development were involved in this project. And the Frankfort Plant Board, as I said, they had major utility involvement in this project. We also dealt with 3 private other utilities other than Columbia Gas. We dealt with AT&T, Kentucky Wired, and yeah, Columbia, that's right, Columbia, AT&T, and Kentucky Wired. They were also involved in the project for relocation. I'll segue this into Chase and let him go into some of the project specifics, and he'll talk about the design team and the folks who were involved in that.
Thank you very much. So as Chuck mentioned, there was a number of folks from each of the different entities from the organizations listed from the public side that were vital to the project being successful. I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work with Chuck and his experience from the city side, as well as Susan Oatman from KYTC from start to finish. And they were huge in pushing this project. These projects are fast paced. They require a lot of commitment from a lot of different folks. So it was very helpful. So I was fortunate enough to be the project manager for Strand as the prime consultant. We worked with Human Nature. They were the landscape architect. Third Rock Consultants handled the environmental for the project. Cultural Resource Analyst was involved with cultural, historic, and archaeological services, and Vector Engineer Wayne here was the geotechnical engineer and supported the project through construction. So the project purpose and goals that were outlined in the grant award were to eliminate underused travel lanes and incorporate traffic calming measures, improve pedestrian bicycle safety. That photo you saw earlier, kids crossing 2nd Street, expand transit access, improve ADA accessibility. That's a close up of the barriers that were actually built in to the Capitol Avenue Bridge that was built in 1938. So that presented some unique barriers to the project. Strengthen connections with the state capitol building, enhance the streetscape character, reduce stormwater runoff from entering the combined sewer system, and reduce combined sewer overflows into the Kentucky River. That's actually a picture of one of the overflows with one of the signs. If you read closely, it says when it rains, don't swim with fish. And so the project is unique in a transportation project that's able to have an environmental benefit, and having the city of Frankfort and Frankfort Sewer Department support the project was very vital. So talked about the fast track project. All Tiger grants are. This project went all the way from preliminary design through construction in less than 4 years. So we had environmental document, file design, right-of-way acquisition, utility design, and construction. Last week, the contractor was able to get the project open to traffic. It's nice to be able to say that at the meeting today. But so there was a big push at the end, and there's still a little bit of work remaining to do, but it'll be wrapped up this year. So that's really exciting for the city. In the alternative development, the project purpose, goals, guiding plans, Chuck and I we had about 23 stakeholder meetings, so we had a lot of input from various corridor stakeholders. And then traffic and parking analysis, try to understand what the corridor really needs to right size it. And so alternatives were developed and evaluated for 2nd Street, Capitol Avenue, and Main Street. Again, those are all part of the US60 route from Frankfort. So when it came to eliminating underused travel lanes, during the project team, we had represented from KYTC District 5, and Brian's here for that. We had central office traffic and design as well. We're all involved in taking a look at the corridor that used to be 4 lanes and it was converted to 3. And then the question is, can it be 2 to provide additional space along the corridor? And through that evaluation, there was 4 signalized intersections on 2nd Street, Bridge Street, Steel, Shelby, and Capitol. And we found that 2 of the intersections didn't need the warrants for having a signalized intersection anymore. And so the cabinet agreed, and we were able to convert those to all-way stops, and then take the money that was going to be invested in that and invest in other components of the project. So that was a positive. So incorporating traffic calming measures, the top right image, actually Tyler Middleton Wagner took that, working with PACE, and it's looking south. You can see the Capitol in the back, and there's Louisville Hill. Louisville Hill coming into Frankfort as an over 5% downgrade for over half a mile. And so trying to drive the speed limit, you have to ride the brakes coming down the hill. And so one of the big things we had the discussions with the cabinet was how do you slow down traffic, especially when you're at the bottom of the hill already. And so this is a substandard curve by the speed posted speed limit standard that was modified in 1947. The cabinet did, and they built some stone walls that were on the inside. Of course, you have a National Register Historic structure with the school on the opposite side, so you're really in a tight corridor. So we worked to widen the sidewalks on the inside, narrow the overall lanes, and add a raised median. And the city and the cabinet will continue to kind of evaluate how these changes are helping influence speeds within the corridor. But the bottom left just shows some of those changes that took place. Improved pedestrian safety. That's the same image you saw earlier that Chuck talked about, the 70-foot crossing. That was a slip lane. And when cars were making that movement, they were focused on other vehicles and maybe not on the pedestrian that would have been on the right of them. So it was very hard for kids to be able to walk to school. The school's right in the background. The bottom photo on the left is another one of the aerial images taken like looking towards downtown. And then this is half the distance. So the crosswalk, we were able to tee up the intersection. We had to make Conway a right in, right out movement to remove it from the signalized intersection, which improved the overall operation of the intersection while providing space for public art and enhanced pedestrian space along the edge. Improved pedestrian and bicycle safety. One, we wanted to provide a facility for all users. With school traffic, the high school's not far. You have kids that walk back and forth, and they currently were using the sidewalk system to be able to walk and through the engagement. And then this is some of the design guidance that came out in 2018. The city of Lexington and the MPO produced kind of some guidance on what type of bicycle facility is important based on speed and then and volume. And so we utilized some of the guidance that was out at the time, and then also just what the public wanted, and ended up with a shared use facility on one side. So improved ADA accessibility barriers. Again, the same photo. The signed ADA route, if you were coming down East Main, made you cross the Kentucky River twice to get downtown. And so there was physical signs that said signed ADA route. So, and because it was a set of stairs on both sides, and the photo doesn't do you justice, but in 1938, when the road project came through to put the Capitol Avenue Bridge in, that sunken sidewalk used that step down. And so they raised the whole road to be able to install the bridge. There's a 10% downgrade to that segment. So it was very difficult to be able to navigate. We worked with KYTC Design and FHWA to take a look at design options. And what you'll see is basically some of the barriers were removed. So it's still a steep slope, but how do you get people that they can navigate around the steep slope? So the bottom left shows two-tiered sidewalk that allowed you to be able to come to a level landing and have a lower area next to the building. And then the bottom right shows the slope around the set of stairs. We wanted to actually remove the other set of steps, but that was all built into that retaining wall. And so the cost to do that, there's some moment slabs associated with it, so lowering the grade was very costly. And so that was elected. You can walk around the intersection, the other three legs of it. Enhance the streetscape character. We talked about underground and overhead utilities. The bottom left was a photo that existed beforehand. Top right is a current photo. You see there's no overhead utilities on the section between Bridge and Capitol. New decorative street lighting. One of the things that came up is the old street lighting wasn't in the best condition, and it had overhead wires that were connected to it. And during construction, when they removed the overhead wires, one of the lights fell. And so just to show you that this old cast iron infrastructure, may be pretty, but it needed to be improved, and the project was able to do that. The section in front of the school, from a schedule timing standpoint, was too complicated to underground that segment, even though would have been great to just even acquisition that would have been required. but they were able to use ductile iron poles and kind of space them close together to help with that. Enhance the streetscape character. One of the things I love about Frankfort is all the historic photos. The Kentucky Heritage Council or Society on their website, you can see all these unique photos from Frankfort. And the bottom left is one of the photos, and then we utilized 16 granite storyline pavers. And so they basically took those images and then they helped tell a story. The city's historian and various divisions within the city help look at the content. So before the singing bridge was there, the covered bridge, and so there's some information about the covered bridge. And so really quick ways to show history to the people that live there. This is, the project wasn't able to actually install public art, but it was able to build a foundation and provide space. This is a concept rendering that the city did on, they're working, I think they had a separate grant to actually do the public art, and that's anticipated for this fall. It's the dragonfly on, so it'd be a neat piece of public art that the project was able to support, but not have to directly install. Reduce stormwater from the combined sewer. So to further complicate things, South Frankfort used to flood, and so there's a flood wall that protects South Frankfort. And so you have these combined sewer pump stations that then flow through flood pump stations, which then go to the Kentucky River. And so the project was able to install dedicated storm sewer and then redirect the stormwater from the combined sewer pump station to a combined sewer overflow pipe that was in 2nd Street. It was 21 feet down. So there was pretty deep excavation to be able to install it. But this allows, under normal rain events, that allows all that stormwater to go directly to the Kentucky River. And then we incorporated urban rain gardens, had forest pavement, and we reduced impervious area to help have the water quality benefit before that water hits the Kentucky River. This also required installing new dedicated sanitary sewer system too. So there was a tremendous amount of infrastructure to support the separation. Environmental, early on, to try to get an environmental document that quickly required a strong partnership with KYTC, Division of Environmental Analysis, and SHPO. And we did a corridor walkthrough together, and it was really nice from my perspective to be able to hear the concerns directly that we should be looking for along the corridor. And then they could hear what we're thinking about from the design, and really it helped streamline that process. And so it received a categorical exclusion level 1 in September 2019. Some of the photos you see is that they had a lot of coal chutes that extended out within right of way on Bridge Street. The buildings I think were built before 1900. So there's a lot of really old infrastructure. This is where City Hall sits today, and on the top right, and that's a gasoline station. So they used the nickname for the corridor was Gasoline Alley. And Chuck, how many USTs did the project remove? 10. So these weren't regulated USTs, but we had a partnership with the Kentucky Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet, and then KYTC DEA. When something came up, it was nice being in Frankfort. So they were able to come down and quickly evaluate, and the project was able to remove 10 undocumented underground storage tanks from the corridor. And so the further environmental benefit took place. Historic stone wall railing. Right before we got the categorical exclusion, someone decided they wanted to be a consulting party, like maybe really late in it. And their biggest concern was this historic rock wall that existed on the school side of Bridge Street. On the back side, it's a little bit hard to tell from the image. It's about a 15-foot drop. And so that was kind of nice seat height level. And so there was a risk associated. So we wanted to be able to raise the height without messing with a wall that nobody knew what it was, made out of, besides stone, or, what was designed for. And so working with the environmental folks, we removed the concrete cap and used the historic mix for concrete, and installed a railing on the top that allowed it to meet the guardrail height without adversely affecting the wall. So it was, again, that partnership of working with staff to kind of evaluate and identify options. I guess one thing on that too, the city's historic preservation officer used to work for SHPO, and she came in during the project. She was actually one of the corridor stakeholder initially, and then became city representative. And so that was a nice bridge to be able to evaluate those quickly. Right away, historic research supports right of way determination. These are some really interesting photos from the early 1900s, between 1915 and 1934 along the corridor. And one of the property owners along the corridor didn't want sidewalks in front of their property and made the claim that they owned all the way to the edge of the pavement. And basically, they had a prior disagreement with the transportation cabinet and almost tried to stop that portion of the project from being installed. But that was part of the goals and objectives, to improve safety for kids. And so the city and the cabinet didn't want to do that. So we went through and took a little bit deeper dive in the deeds and plats and historic photos, and found some neat images. The bottom left photo of that group, you can't really see it. There's a US route shield, the back of it, signifying that was US60, and then sidewalk right in front of that property with fences and other features that were actually described in the older deeds when you went back through them. And the gentleman claimed that there was never a sidewalk, but when we showed him the pictures of the sidewalk from, before it was the facility it is today. I mean, I've been the biggest fan, but overall we were able to work through it together with him. The project did acquire 8 parcels without condemnation proceedings. One of the most challenging aspects was it was during COVID, and so people didn't want to meet maybe directly with you, and so it required proactive communication. And Matt is here with us, and he did a lot of that right-of-way acquisition, which was really helpful. Utility coordination. This was a significant utility coordination project. Basically, almost everything was going to be new. Everything ended up being new except AT&T's conduit. And so that presented some problems during construction. But Frankfort Sewer Department has new infrastructure. They replaced pieces of force main. It was asbestos cement. It was in the area. They actually installed provisions for additional force main that provide interconnectivity between the Capitol Avenue pump station and the Ewing Street pump station, increasing resiliency and being able to kind of pump back and forth between the two. The plant board, the water line was over 100 years old that was on the corridor. Electric communication in Columbia, but basically it's a little hard to tell. But when we started the process, this is really, it's an old city, had an abandoned trolley, and so there wasn't a lot of documentation. And so Frankfort Sewer Department and City of Frankfort took a lot of steps to be able to do some CCTV investigations. And so we basically ended up finding that there ended up being a parallel system the entire way. So we had a lot more infrastructure under the ground that we had to work through than what they originally thought when the grant application was originally awarded. The construction contract, Pace Contracting LLC out of Louisville is the prime contractor. The grant amount was 6.9 million, or the award amount was, and it was 7% below the engineer's estimate. We have weekly construction progress meetings. Chuck and I attended with utility providers, the contractor team. I think we're up to like 55 meetings that we've had throughout construction. City of Frankfort handled project communication, and there's a lot of updates to the public. We provided consultant construction services working with Vector throughout construction, and we had support from central office and District 5 when things came up. And it's nice to be able to work directly with KYTC staff, preparing inspection reports and getting those submitted monthly. The communication approach, the 47 project, it's maybe 48 now, I think, since this was sent out. So yeah, so there's been a lot. Chuck did a great job of keeping the public informed and constantly getting information, because when you're digging and redoing a street and have some infrastructure that gets that deep, you have some pretty significant impacts. The city came up with a Tracking the Tiger app, and that was helpful to help people understand where construction was going to be. The city implemented additional construction wayfinding signage to help improve access to businesses along the corridor. There was a series of coffee chats where Katie, Chuck, myself, and others, gave updates to the public. And the bottom right photo was along East Main Street. during construction, one of the things we found, there was a resident that had a physical impairment and wasn't able to, was in a wheelchair. And I believe they were out of town and we didn't realize it, but they were going to show up and Chuck was contacted and the contractor and the city quickly worked together to be able to get them accessible entrance into their development. It just shows the commitment the city had and also the contractor to quickly work together to be able to help the public. Abandoned trolley. So I don't know, maybe a month before we went to bid, the utility relocation project had already started, and sure enough, their first excavation found an abandoned trolley beneath Second Street. So underneath the asphalt was a trolley system that was actually used to build the state capitol and was abandoned in 1934. So the Capitol Avenue plans actually removed a piece that was within the intersection of Capitol and Second Street. But here's a photo of the abandoned trolley. We found a 1900 First Ward map, which really interesting, but there's a really faint line if you look in it tight. And that was comparing it to maps of the abandoned trolley system was the route. So it was there. It was just really faint. And so we worked with the district to modify the MOT plan and get that ready for the construction contract, included provisions for removal, and then worked with the environmental folks just to make sure that what we were doing was appropriate. Exploratory investigations. During construction, there was a lot of unknowns still. 29 exploratory investigations were performed within the street. And so the contractor performed those and more extensive CCTV investigation were done by Frankfort Sewer Department. It looks like a mine shaft, but this is a rock sewer that was active. Sanitary sewer actively went through this rock line sewer. It probably was a culvert for the railroad, before it was built. And so we wanted to make sure if we were abandoning it, we didn't want to leave it under the street, that we were handling that appropriately. So SHPO and KYTC were engaged in that process, but we were able to provide new sanitary pipe and new storm sewer to serve these properties along the way. But there's some of the stuff that you can find in these older cities near our river towns.
How big was that?
I think it looks huge, but it wasn't that. It was about 24 by 24. Utility conflicts during construction. So we had tremendous support from every utility. The one that wasn't as engaged was AT&T, and AT&T had a lot of really old conduits within the corridor. And we tried to get them to relocate, but they were a little bit non-committal through that process and didn't really do wasn't very helpful through the design. So as we looked at the vacuum excavates, and that's some of the vacuum excavates that took place, we put that early on because we knew it was a risk in the construction contract. So all these digs were done immediately as the contractor got going in early 2020, and we worked to develop and mitigate the conflicts. And so we were able to do some redesign of the sanitary sewer system and avoid impact. And then we worked with them to adjust some of their vaults. They basically had like 8 by 10 vaults in the road that were buried in. And this is some of their oldest infrastructure. Basically has some type of dehumidifier that like pumps it through. So they call it like was it paper? Some type of it has like paper around it. Of the wires, and they have to make sure that it has humidity control. They don't like to use it anymore, but they still have customers on there, so they have to keep it.
That's AT&T.
AT&T, yeah. So we worked with the utilities group, KYTC. They were very supportive in helping resolve those issues, and were able to mitigate that without impact of the construction schedule. The Main Street railing, when the contractor got in and started removing some of the sidewalk, they discovered that our portions of the sidewalk were actually functioning as a mullion slab for the retaining wall that kind of overlooks the Kentucky River. So some of these revisions were construction revisions that were undocumented on the original plans. We worked with the Division of Structures to quickly develop a design that addresses that basically has a new mullion slab constructed. And the bottom left photo shows that we were able to still incorporate landscaping along with that reinforced, concrete mullion slab. East Main Street marking revisions, as Chuck was talking about, there was the other project, adjacent project that as part of the Tiger grant that was redoing the storm and sanitary sewer along East Main Street. And so KYTC wanted to remark it as a 3-lane section. We were able, this came up a couple months before we did, we were able to work with KYTC to extend and modify our project marking to be able to incorporate the marking revisions that they wanted to do. Just another way that the district had a priority and the city and the KYTC were able to work together to implement it at a lower cost by incorporating into a larger construction project. Chuck, you wanna?
As you listen to Chase describe this project, there were a lot of historical, utility, local property issues. And so I think the reason that we were able to get this project done in basically a 3.5-year period between preliminary engineering start and substantial completion was the strong leadership and decision-making process, because my full-time, part-time job was to manage this project. So my experience with KYTC, knowing who the people were, most of them were getting a lot younger, and working with the local utilities kind of helped that process move along quickly. I mean, we were able to identify project issues and deal with them in a quick fashion. Again, as Chase mentioned, we had the fortunate circumstance to have KYTC, DEA folks close by and Kentucky Energy and Environment Cabinet folks close by, and they would come right down and take a look within a day or two of what our issue was, and then we would resolve it and move on. Strong communications with property owners. I mean, it was almost daily that I was being contacted by adjacent businesses or residents about an issue. This project was constructed in basically in a closing a block or two at a time. We didn't do part width. We basically did the same closing block time. So you can imagine how that affected residents and businesses getting people to their business or getting to their home and having to park somewhere and walking when the place was tore up from sidewalk to sidewalk. So we came up with a lot of issues there. So I think this project was successful just by the relationships that we built with all the players and addressing issues and resolving those quickly and having good communications with the community. As Chase said, I tried to update. I had a long distribution email list of folks that I tried to communicate occasionally what was going on, what traffic changes were going to take place, and kind of where the project was in general, the status of the work. So I think these were reasons, as listed here, that we had a successful project, and it's going to hopefully finish up here in the next month or so, and we can all move on to something else. Do you have anything else to add to that? Any quick questions? We're about out of time. Yes, Dave.
So have you received any negative comments from the public?
Yeah, the whole project, until we got it done. Okay, now it's open to traffic. Nobody's got any issue. So, I guess that would be a little flippant there, but yeah, we did receive a lot of negative comments. I think the biggest one was the change in design of closing access off to Conway Street from Bridge Street. We've come across the Singing Bridge on Bridge Street, comes to Second Street signal intersection. It's a signalized intersection. You used to be able to go from Bridge Street, jog and go on to Conway. Well, the design added a non-mountable median, raised median there, so people can't make that move anymore. And so it's just, people getting to change their habits, change their travel patterns. So I think that was probably the biggest negative comment we got, was that change in accessibility to Conway Street, to and from Conway Street. Anything else? All right, we're done. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.